Hello and welcome to the program. I am Herein. Today I would like to continue with the rest of the program we have started, telling you a little bit more about things that might be of some value. As at March 2015, Magda seems unchanged in her only resolve of forever preaching that Herein is dishonest for being ejected from Jehovah's truth. That is what she had been led to believe upon the most honest lies of the Jehovah's Witnesses she has been surrounded with, according to several correspondences I became aware of. What I have discovered was from very reliable sources and not idle gossip. With her current mindset, I can easily claim that she has remained stuck in the groove while the entire world moved on. I also know it to be a genetic issue she cannot help. Added to this, there is a stress-related anomaly, which is known to be caused by the lifestyle forced upon her. Nor can we ignore the fact that during pregnancy, her mother was doing all kinds of things, including excessive alcohol consumption, to cause a miscarriage. Obviously, it is easier to blame me, being the soft target, with all kinds of dishonesty, for that is what Jehovah's Witnesses ardently prefer to see, encouraging her to do the same as part of their faith. They have to defend the judgments of their judicial committee, ungrounded or not, as they always need to be right. And disfellowshipped can only be on the devil's side. A beautifully presented exterior is not proof of the interior, and one cannot judge others by their appearance. When Claude disappeared without telling me anything, as had often been the case in the recent past, although he was not obliged to, but by nature being curious about where he was, I sent him a message, inquiring if he was all right. Instead, his sister Birgit informed me that he was in Perth with his good friend Michael, and that they went to dinner with Mum. Wonderful. When corresponding with Birgit, I deliberately made mention of them being obviously close friends, but not implying anything negative, for it is admirable for anybody to have friends one can trust. I was unsure what they used to do in the past, and did not even want to know if they had a few typical teenage trends, such as spending time with girls, going to parties, enjoying habit-forming substances, drinking, or engaging in a religious activity, like Magda and her friends were encouraging them to. Were they perhaps studying hard towards a worthwhile academic achievement? What I talked about with Birgit was nothing more than just a general subject parents normally discuss. According to Birgit, when Claude was addicted to alcohol and drugs and was very sickly, she had helped him with his rehabilitation. She also told me in regard to her brother's current behavior towards Daniel, who was apparently not invited to Miss Maud's for dinner when we were there last time, and did not contribute towards the expenses incurred that Claude needed to apologize for his grave mistake. She even felt concerned about his involvement with drug dealers who were after their money and might kill him. I could not be certain how correct those statements were. Firstly, I have been told a lot of lies and many untruths about me, have been relayed to their mother and others. Secondly, I had not seen any of them for many years and was unsure about what characteristics they had developed. People's second-hand information about me obtained from lies deliberately and liberally spoken by my young daughter or young daughters became their belief about my character, which in reality they had no idea of. In fact, I am now beginning to discover who my children are and what has become of them since their mother took them away with the invented justification of me being an extremely wicked person, and none of them truly wanted to get to know me other than reject me under strict Jehovah's Witness dictates. After my disfellowshipment. However, I am certain that they either do not realize it or are unable to comprehend any part of it. Without blaming anybody and without any discrimination against anyone, an observer of the real facts should be the judge. I do not need to justify myself because I know with absolute certainty that those with their untruths and treacherous lies will one day fall on their own swords. During their childhood, Magda was demanding them to tell her everything they did, listened to, learned at school, about the other children they played with, and also what they had learned from their all evil and ignorant father. From time to time, they were punished severely in the name of discipline for talking to certain children because they belonged to the worldly families. This has been ingrained in their personalities so badly that even today one can still observe the same or similar trends with them. This is not an assumption born of hatred. My daughter tells everything spoken with some minor or major additions of falsehood to her mother. That's what it was like. And might not even realize what she is doing. What I am observing here is the result of Magda and her faithful brother's disciplinary treatment of the children, especially after their abduction. Unfortunately, at her current age, Magda seems to suffer stress-related anxieties, according to what one discovers from very reliable sources, including my discussions with Claude, an extremely logical and psychologically proper construct. Later, Magda told Claude to tell his father to be honest for once and tell the truth, whilst also chastising him as if he was a young child of 14. He spoke to me openly and almost crying that he was certainly not on drugs and that he was very concerned about that issue, without denying that once he had huge problems and that Birgit had helped him to recover. He also told me how furious his friend Michael was about hearing certain things, as there was a homosexual insinuation regarding him and Claude, according to some gossip, for they had often been seen together. I was apparently knowledgeable about this absurdity and falsehood under the banner of truth, and was urged to be honest for once and tell the truth. Does this not show the observer how adamant Magda is or was in her presumptions of me, painting my character as immoral for not following their supposed righteous ways? It is a very strange phenomenon to observe people seeing two men together and immediately assume that they are gays. After observing people's expressions when seeing me with Claude, I often felt the need to tell them that we were father and son, seeing how their facial expressions change as if they are embarrassed for thinking what they assumed, gives me great pleasure. However, recalling Magda's words to Claude, I knew what she told him contained her special character references about me, reminding him what she had been teaching the children for years, to be honest for once, obviously implying her false and ungrounded assumptions of my seemingly prime characteristics. What she therefore claims literally means that she eternally believes Suren is a liar and a dishonest person, thereby defaming my reputation. It also means, accusing me with what she has been doing for years, under the careful supervision of her associates. That also means that, as a citizen of this country, I can legally sue her even after all these years, but considering her age and psychological standing, and being my very first ever serious love and mother of my children, I will only offer her my sadness that she has been sucked into complete darkness, superstition, and cultism. Although Birgit told me nothing in this regard, I nevertheless furnished a long text message urging her to assist the family, which has already been broken to pieces, not needing to be completely destroyed, and therefore not to stress her mother unnecessarily by telling her everything we may have spoken between us, for we can easily deal with some of these things, especially after hearing things from various sources, and particularly from Claude. There may have developed unwanted habits and unusual behavior patterns with their mother. For instance, her going to the restrooms when they were having dinner, but not returning after a very long time, upon which Claude discovered her outside walking in small circles on one spot, pretending she was trying to call him on his mobile, which was certainly worrying. Unfortunately, Magda's mother, kneeling on the floor sometimes, dipping her fingers into the carpet and licking the little morsels and other small items, was equally concerning. That might have been due to being constantly influenced by wine. But then again, as indicated earlier, it could be a genetic issue. But what the Wicked Witness organization is doing to multitudes of people around the globe is neither forgettable nor forgivable. As far as I'm concerned, what has been observed over the years, including Magda smashing her car and not knowing what had happened, cannot be a good sign. Knowing how dull Jehovah's Witnesses become after many years of limiting themselves and only filling their minds with forever repeated Bible texts while isolating themselves against the so-called wicked world. It is extremely dangerous for the health of the brain. This may be one of the reasons why many witnesses suffer from psychological anomalies, and particularly the elderly are more vulnerable, for they are the forgotten ones, due to being inactive in witnessing activities. Taking all this into account, I further wrote to Birgit that I loved her as my daughter, and it was not my intention to speak about these issues when I next visited them in Perth. Later, on Saturday, the 28th of March, 2015, I told her repeatedly not to stress her mother by telling everything she dreamt of. However, for a lengthy period of time, she did not respond. Was she resentful about what I said? Did she feel that everything I told her had to be spoken to Mom for her approval to contact me? Curiously waiting, I was in need to urge her to abstain in stressing Magda, for she had been feeding her mother for years with many untruths, or things gossiped about which did not have any substance or logic. I know for absolute certainty that she had been telling such things as her dad conjuring up evil spirits and talking to ghosts, arguing that she had witnessed those things, without being the case. When Claude visited me for the very first time, after all those years, at one of my art classes in Frankston, after he was disfellowshipped, he said he wanted to get to know his father. During a Jehovah's Witness assembly in 2014, which was held in Melbourne, also attended by Magda, of course, who communicated with him over the phone after she returned to Perth. And when Claude made mention of meeting with his dad, all hell broke loose. Magda advised him that she'd rather prefer he did not speak to his dad, for he was wicked. As one can see, even in her ripe old age, she never changed her ungrounded idiocies. When Claude told his mother he would love to see his mum and dad seated side by side and take a picture of them together, Magda told him again that she never wanted to talk to people who spoke to spirits. A year later, I was to discover more about Annette and Birgit through Claude. According to what I was told, Annette had been the source of all kinds of ill thought about me, creating character references which are not true. She had allegedly influenced her sister, Birgit, who, being extremely gullible, just like her dear mother, believed everything Annette told her. For example, seeing my boxed skeleton and interpreting it as a ghostly experience behind my shoulders, embedded in the wall with blood gushing out of its eye sockets, and having told about it to her sister, it subsequently became internalized by Birgit, the totally honest girl, as if she was the one having experienced it, turning it into a false memory without realizing. She naively took that experience to her mother, telling her all about what she had observed. It was then classified as expected by Magda under Jehovah's Witness superstition as an evil practice conducted by the only evil man in the world, who was no other than me. When they were very young, Birgit believed everything her sister imagined, later making it her own reality. In other words, it seems that both sisters, at the time, conveniently forgot everything good about me, only thinking the worst possible character references they could create, taking them to their honest mother, who only wanted to believe all things ugly, all things inappropriate, and all things evil about me, due to my supposedly being dishonest for not accepting the Jehovah's Witness teachings as true and practicing devil worship. Since I did not see them for decades and had not spoken with any of them, my knowledge may be second-hand, but my analysis, particularly regarding Birgit, is the real deal, for I have spoken to her friends who approached me first, and my more recent encounters with her proved me correct. Both she and Magda were unable to see anything good about me, for reasons we have so far considered. Every evil deed witnessed in the world was focused within my persona, as far as Magda and her only friends were concerned. One of the evils my children were inflicted with, to imagine, was my taking their photographs naked and showing them to some dirty old man who were apparently my friends, as if I had nothing better to do. Remember, full custody was granted to me, and I became their both parents, whilst neglecting my own well-being, for I loved my children and did not want them to lack for anything. Their welfare and health, both physical and mental, was paramount. On the other hand, their mother, who considered her so-called faithful brothers and sisters' belief above everything else, hated me thoroughly after my disfellowshipment, apparently becoming rejected of God, therefore considering me as evil number one in the world. Her faithful brothers had advised her not to live with a man who was an evildoer, and Jehovah needed these children to be trained as new cadets in the new world order after Armageddon, encouraging her to break their trust in their father, who was apparently incapable of looking after his children, for he did not follow God's principles and was a godless man who worshipped the devil. They considered their ungrounded assumptions about me as the absolute truth and not the actual words, declaring my reality to them, needing to consider me as a liar in order to justify their falsehoods. As far as Jehovah's Witnesses are concerned, their assumptions had to be the only truth, even when completely wrong and not based on thorough research, whereas the real truth, based on scientific analysis by independent sources, has to be incorrect and baseless in their eyes. Therefore, can one trust their judgments? How can one rely on Magda's assumptions? Remember, she never wanted to know about my professional and cultural background. In fact, completely ignoring my standpoint under the banner of all men are the same, believing she was the only well-educated and cultured person. Probably she had introduced me to her faithful associates and children as a member of the Stone Age period of human development. And my children often treated me as if I belonged to the hunter-gatherer period of the evolutionary chain. She has thoroughly helped her children to turn away from their father, returning to their supposedly caring mother to train them as servants of God. Right in the beginning, the Australian legal system saw it fit for the girls to stay with their father for reasons we have already spoken about. When they decided to grant me custody, they have most certainly studied my characteristics and moral conduct. Any discordance, along with abnormal activity, would have immediately resulted in our children's custody either being granted to their mother or being made wards of the state to be looked after by the government of Australia. Jehovah's Witnesses and Magda, although knowing the facts, had to create other methods to distance the children from their father, who they condemned to damnation due to his supposed disobedience to God's divine laws. In the process, our daughters became completely confused, not even recognizing their own individual selves. I felt Annette became bitter and hateful towards her mother, conditioned to see me doing evil things, bypassing everything I stood for, ignoring my research, work, and responsibilities, and under peer pressure, comparing me with the fathers of a few of her unfortunate friends. Admittedly, I have documented my children's growing up in photographs, as I have already mentioned, but I have never been interested in child pornography, as my daughters attempted to lie about, just to make me appear as if I was taking their pictures inappropriately, even showing them to made-up friends. This can only be born out of their inner hatred against me, as inflicted right from the beginning of their lives. Remember how Annette's German grandparents had been treating her, supposedly as a joke? Later, during their early childhood, they were further influenced by their mother under her Jehovah's Witness brothers' supervision and directives to hate the evildoers, as far as their mother and faithful friends were concerned, supposedly only seeking God's righteousness. I was condemned as an evil man who apparently had nothing else to do other than hurt people, was a sex addict, and who showed his children's nude pictures to old men. In the courtroom, Magda tried to damage my reputation, never attempting to see anything good I had done. When the custody of all our children was granted to me, she stood in front of her faithful brothers, shouting that I was not a good man, a devil worshipper, performing black magic, and would be dangerous to their minds, and that she would make the better parent. One could hear her brothers whispering the words she needed to utter. Did they really understand what harm they were engaged in doing? After she threw herself on the floor, supposedly having fainted, the court adjourned until later. During the break, when I was asked if it would be a good idea for my wife to have custody of my son, my lawyer advised me to accept the proposal, as we could later come up with a better solution. After she absconded with the children and disappeared for a long time, I sought ways to unite the children legally, but she had already indoctrinated them against me, alienating them at the same time. Remember also when Annette was unusually willing to stay with her friend after which she was abducted? I was meant to look incapable of looking after her. If I was a careless, irresponsible, and imbecilic man, would the court have allowed the child to stay with me, her father? However, I discovered that some of Annette's abductors were ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, or had been involved with them in the past. After this heart-wrenching experience, Annette, now aged around 8, was never been the same. What had been done to her during that abduction, and what indeed during the with temporary but forced custody at her mother's. I am so certain that although I had their custody, during Magda's excess, they were constantly subjected to Jehovah's Witness propaganda, keeping them under their spell. After all, their faithful mother had to be vindicated under the righteousness umbrella of her devoted brothers in faith, or I should say, the cult. I also believe that my daughters wanted to see me lesser than their mother, who in reality was born with an obvious lack, presenting extreme and senseless one-track-mindedness and naivety. Under her influence, they completely ignored my background, believing that Magda was intellectually better. Repeating myself once more, even the actual skeleton I had for my studies and artistic purposes, which was normally kept in its box, was seen as if I had it for the practice of black art. In her imagination, Annette might have considered it as a vision of a ghostly kind. This appears like a comedy sketch at first, but in reality, it is really very sad. I shall leave this here for the moment and will continue with the rest of the story by the next episode. Until then, be happy, keep smiling, and keep well. Thank you.